Okay, wonderful. We are going to begin now. As people are joining us, that is totally fine. The webinar is being recorded, and so it will be posted for people to see and look at and hear anything that they may have missed or may want to listen to again. So no worries if anyone joins a little bit later on, that information will be available. So thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our virtual kickoff of our Brave Letters campaign. We are so excited to be launching this campaign, and we had an incredible team putting this campaign together and doing a lot of brainstorming and thinking about it, and why we need it right now, and the value of it. And we'll dive into some of those things throughout the next little bit of what is Brave Letters and why is it important. To start us off, I just do want to issue a potential trigger warning. Obviously, we are talking about eating disorders, disordered eating, and mental health and mental illness in general. And so there will hopefully not be anything necessarily explicit said, but our panelists are talking about their lived experience and the experience that they have had with eating disorders and disordered eating. So just do want to put out a potential trigger warning if you're not in a space where you might be able to take that in a healthy and safe, positive way. Just to be careful, take care of yourself. There are resources on the Body Brave website that can be useful to help support you, or if you have other resources that you would prefer, please feel free to use those resources if at any point there is any triggering content that affects you. Just another note, please feel free to use the Q&A. For me, it's down at the bottom. For you, it might be somewhere else on the screen. Don't know. But the Q&A, if you have any questions for the panelists, any questions as we kind of go through the letter and talk about what it looks like to send it. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to use the Q&A box, and we'll be hopefully getting into all of those questions. Just a brief kind of timeline as we're going through the day. This is just kind of how the evening is going to look. So we'll be starting off, oh, this timeline's a little off. We'll be starting off just with our panelists. So where it says questions, it should say panelists. That's 100% my fault. But just talking to our panelists a little bit about their experience and why this campaign matters. We'll go through a little bit of a tutorial just of the letter, what the functions of the platform that we're using are, and those kinds of details. And then at the end, we'll have a bit of a Q&A if you have any questions about the letter or for our panelists, and we'll be going through some of those things. So that is a little bit of a breakdown of just how we're going through some of these things. Yeah, I should be able to see that now. So we'll be going through our panelists, a quick tutorial, and then a Q&A. And so we're very excited to dive in a little bit. So this campaign means a lot to us at Body Brave, which is where kind of the idea was originally hosted, and coming out of the campaign is really, really important to us, and important to us more so than just for Body Brave, but for eating disorders across Canada and people who work with individuals who struggle with disordered eating and eating disorders. So the reality is that almost 3 million Canadians currently meet the diagnostic criteria for an eating disorder. And that's with diagnostic criteria being so specific. And so we know that many, many more experience disordered eating that may not be diagnosed, but is very, very serious and potentially life-threatening. Eating disorders are the third most prevalent mental illness in Canada. And so they're, as much as they do get swept under the rug and not talked about as often and not funded as often, they are really prevalent and they are really serious. For people who are struggling, support is sparse across Canada, despite them being so prevalent and despite so many meeting the criteria for help. People are dying on wait lists, people are being turned away from the support that they need, and people are desperate to be heard and to be seen. And that is the current reality of eating disorders in Canada, and that's why this campaign is really, really important. And we know that support is out there. We know that there are a lot of different organizations and groups that are doing a lot of really, really good work to support people with eating disorders. So community-based treatment has been proven to lead to improved health outcomes. It reduces social isolation, reduces hospitalization, meaning that more of that space is open. And really, community-based treatment is important for supporting sustainable recovery that lasts for a long time and that doesn't need to be treated as seriously as often. When community-based treatments exist, we are able to support those who fall through the cracks of the traditional supports, people whose weight might not be specific enough for inpatient programs and things of that nature. With early intervention and rapid access to quality treatment, approximately 75% of people with eating disorders recover. And so we know that this is possible. We know that supports across communities and across Canada do help and play such an important role. And that's why this Brave Letters campaign is so important. Eating disorders are generally underfunded. And within that, community-based supports are specifically underfunded versus hospital or other kind of treatment options. And so we are calling on our elected representatives to increase our visibility and provide additional funding to ensure that those in our communities are receiving the care that they need. And so without the ability to increase our capacity, people in Ontario, people across Canada are going to die from a very treatable illness. And the same is true for many across Canada struggling with all different kinds of eating disorders. So we are so excited to be presenting this panel as a little bit of a kickoff to the campaign. For Body Brave, lived experience is kind of at the center of what we do, and speaking to people who have had an eating disorder, who have supported someone through an eating disorder, and who are really in that realm and have lived it is so, so important. And so they're going to be discussing a little bit about why Brave Letters are necessary, why this campaign is necessary, and why we need to change the landscape of eating disorder supports. And so we originally had 4 incredible panelists. Now we have 3 incredible panelists, which we're so, so excited for. Wendy Preskow, Tierra Hohn, and Alicia Pinelli. Unfortunately, Dr. Jill Andrew, an incredible MPP in Toronto, was originally slated to speak with us, and we are so, so excited. She cannot join us today. We've been in correspondence with her team throughout the day, just keeping tabs on things, and she is currently in the House of Commons doing some very, very important MPP work, and obviously we respect that very much. So she's not able to join us here, but we are in talks with her and her team about how she can support this campaign moving forward and what that will look like otherwise. So that is a-okay, and we completely understand that she's got lots of things going on. So we have 3 incredible panelists who all come with such a wealth of knowledge and so much goodness and information. So we're so, so excited. I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into a little bit of conversation. Wendy, why don't you kick us off with just introducing yourself?
There we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. I am Wendy Preskow, the founder and president of the National Initiative for Eating Disorders, and I started our organization 8.5 years ago, and we were actually launched by our member of the federal government, from the former Conservative government, MP Mark Adler at the time. So we have been going for 8 and a bit years and have spent many, many times going up and down to Ottawa, and I will leave it on to the next one.
Wonderful, thanks, Wendy. Tierra, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tierra. I'm really excited to be a part of this kickoff today. So what I'll be bringing to tonight's discussion is my lived experience. I lived with anorexia for 7 years, and now I'm almost 4 years into my recovery. My experience really just inspired me to create an initiative known as Untouched Beauty, and it's allowed me in the past to connect with other young girls on the topic of body image, eating disorders, and mental health. I have a background in public health, in public policy. I currently work at a youth mental health organization in Toronto. I'm an advisory board member at Body Brave, and I'm also a yoga teacher.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tierra. Alicia, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Sure. So hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alicia, and my pronouns are they and them. I'm actually on the Body Brave board, but beyond that, I am also a social worker in the Niagara region. Currently, I work with an organization called Young Caregivers Association, but prior to that, I worked a lot in the eating disorder world due to my own lived experience. I'm someone who I call myself in recovery. I don't think I'll ever identify fully with the word recovered, and that's just my own personal preference. So I identify as being in recovery from bulimia, and that has been for quite some time in my life. And so throughout my process, I've gotten very involved in the eating disorder world, and I'm also a researcher. So I primarily research trans and non-binary individuals with eating disorders and their own individual experience. Being someone who identifies as non-binary, it really speaks to my experience throughout my own journey. And so I'm very thankful to be here with everyone today.
Great, thanks so much, Alicia, and everyone for introducing yourselves. Awesome. So yeah, thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have you and to kind of have you guys have this conversation with us just about why this is important, why this campaign, and why now. And so the first question we want to dive a little bit into is just a little bit more about why you engage in advocacy for eating disorders. So why is it important? Why in your life has this become something that is really, really important to you? Wendy, would you like to start us off again?
Sure. I also should have mentioned that I have been a caregiver to our daughter for over 20 years who has been suffering with anorexia and bulimia. But fortunately, and I can just thank our lucky stars that she's really in a good place right now. She's working really, really hard to overcome her eating disorder and is just in a different headspace altogether, which has been nothing short of a miracle. So part of why I started NEED was, and our logo is, we have 3 little words underneath our logo of awareness, understanding, and action. And awareness is the foundation that understanding is built upon. The action I will come to a bit later in one of the other questions. But my lived experience as a mom and the absolute and dire lack of awareness and understanding actually drove me to our MP's office. I have to admit, I did try and go to our MPP, which is the provincial government, but it didn't work out, and I moved on to our MP, and he listened, he understood, he realized the absolute, he was completely and utterly overwhelmed. And he launched NEED on February the 22nd, 2012. It was just such a milestone. And at the time, I was innocent, I was inexperienced, but I knew that something had to be done and to change, because I realized that there were hundreds of families just like ours going through the same unfortunate circumstances that we were living through with our daughter, and I knew that there had to be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other people just like us. I have to say that politics and being involved in advocacy was certainly not on my to-do list. I don't even think I really realized what the word advocacy meant when I sort of started on this journey. But I very quickly had a crash course and came to the shocking realization that no one was advocating on behalf of the Canadian eating disorder community across the country. It was a pretty shocking truth for us to understand. And as you are very well aware, all of the medical and frontline professionals could not use their voices and shout and scream the way that basically we could, because nobody was paying us. We still have not been paid. So we really could do whatever we wanted. So with Mark's guidance, our MP, he recommended that we form a steering committee, which we did in his office, and NEED got off the ground. And Lynn Costs, who you all know, I'm sure most of you are hear from Lynn every now and again or all the time. She has really been my right hand through the very beginning of our journey. And with Lynn, Lynn and I actually started on our journey of advocacy in 2013 when Mark opened the doors to Parliament Hill for us. And from that April in 2013, for probably the next 5 years, we went up and down to Ottawa about 16 or 17 times to meet with mental health organizations who unfortunately did not include eating disorders on any of their agendas or curriculum or meetings. And there was certainly not an eating disorder voice around any of these mental health tables. That also has changed. So I just want to give you the heads up if that has also changed. So that's where we started, and where we're at now, right now is, I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but it's been quite the journey. Slow, nothing gets done overnight, and I had no idea about the pace or the slow pace that things take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially as a caregiver, you have such a valuable insight into the world of advocacy, because truly you're advocating for a loved one and doing it on their behalf. And so, your work is just so important, and it really does show just kind of how nuanced advocacy is, how hard it is, and how fast-paced things happen. You know, you went to go visit your MP, and suddenly you had need. And so, it really just shows so much of the power of advocacy in a really, really concrete way. So that's amazing. Thank you so much, Wendy. Tierra, do you want to share a little bit about why you engage in advocacy for eating disorders and why it's important to you?
Yeah, for sure. And before I get into that, I just wanted to say that need has also played like a vital role in my own recovery. Like when I was struggling, I remember just going to one of the events that Wendy and Lynn put on, and it's just been very pivotal in my recovery. So just thank you for starting up something so incredible. The reason why I engage in eating disorder advocacy, I mean, I have a lot of reasons, one of them being like my own lived experience and really just wanting to prevent others from struggling in the way I did, and helping to prevent them from feeling alone, in the sense that they didn't see anyone that looked like them sort of speaking about this topic. I engage in advocacy because, you know, what you mentioned earlier, Erin, like people are dying on wait lists, and not receiving the help that they need. And it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable to be told that you're not sick enough to receive treatment. It's unacceptable that medical professionals receive very little training about eating disorders. It's unacceptable to be on a waiting list for, over a year before receiving any sort of help. It's unacceptable to not be able to receive treatment that is, culturally relevant, trauma informed, the list goes on, right? It's unacceptable that some people are having to spend thousands of dollars out of pocket for treatment. And if you don't have that money, then what happens? So all of these things are really unacceptable, and they just bring me back to the point of why I advocate. And then with regards to my own experience, I started struggling with an eating disorder, anorexia, when I was 16. And if I'm being honest, for a while, I didn't even know what was happening to me. So I knew I was struggling with something, but I had no idea that I had an eating disorder. And there are several reasons for that. I think two of them was the fact that the knowledge, like how I learned about eating disorders prior to actually experiencing it, was like in grade 9 at a phys ed class where a teacher showed us a video of like these white female ballerinas who one of them happened to struggle with bulimia. And so from there on, I kind of associated eating disorders as something that only affected young white females, and if they like dancers or gymnasts. I also only thought that bulimia was the only eating disorder that existed, and that's of course not correct. And then the other reason why I did not know I had an eating disorder was just because of how long it took to actually get diagnosed. It took several months for me to receive any treatment or to receive any sort of diagnosis. And even though I had very clear signs, even though I went to various doctors, even though I attended the emergency room like many times, I didn't receive any sort of diagnosis. And again, like what this reveals is the lack of training in the medical field for diagnosing eating disorders. And that's problematic because you do, in most cases, need that diagnosis to get treatment, right? It also speaks to some of the racism, you know, in getting diagnosed as an eating disorder. Statistically, Black people and people of color don't get diagnosed as often as other groups. So for all those reasons, I advocate for this because it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tierra. And yeah, you spoke to kind of so many important pieces, one being representation. So people aren't able to see themselves as struggling with an eating disorder or struggling with disordered eating because there just isn't representation of that. And that also kind of speaks to the racism within the medical community of they don't see people of color or Indigenous people or Black folk who have eating disorders, and so they do underdiagnose for a number of reasons. But yeah, representation plays a huge role in just all of our understanding of eating disorders and access to treatment. And then yeah, access to, you also mentioned as well, kind of quality treatment and treatment that is culturally informed, that is trauma informed, all of those things. Those play a huge role in not just having, you know, putting on a Band-Aid solution to eating disorders, but actually really kind of getting to the core of people who are struggling and being able to support people through that part. Yeah, incredible points. Thank you so much. Alicia, would you like to share a little bit about why you engage in advocacy for eating disorders and why this work is important to you?
Sure. Hard to follow up, Wendy and Tierra. Both of you said such amazing things that it hits my heart so much. So for myself, my experience, similar to what you said, Tierra, I had no idea I had an eating disorder. And I am a social worker now, and actually my master's of social work, and I've gone through graduate school, but prior to getting into the field and to the work that I'm doing now, I wanted to work in a totally different area. I wanted to work somewhere completely different. I had been doing placements, I had been doing volunteer work in the area I thought I wanted to go into, and then throughout all that time, little did I know that like how much I was struggling with my own eating disorder, and I never realized it. And I can actually remember the day that I kind of like had that epiphany moment of maybe I am struggling and should reach out for support. And in that moment, when I went to go reach out, as someone who identifies as non-binary and someone from a small town, I had no idea where to go. And it was crazy to me that I couldn't just go to my doctor and tell them and they would know where to send me, or I couldn't just go somewhere for a referral. I had to kind of navigate it on my own. And it was very difficult because at the time I was scared to tell anybody in my family what I was dealing with and what was going on with me. And so I ended up reaching out to the National Eating Disorder Information Center, so NEDIC, because they have the directory there. And that helped me kind of on my journey. But myself, I'm from a small town called Port Colborne. It is in the Niagara region. It is kind of in between St. Catharines and Niagara Falls. Most people don't know where it is, and if you have ever heard of it, you've probably just driven through it. And so in our town, even though we had the directory, the closest place to me was over an hour away, and I didn't know what to do. So it wasn't until I started going through my schooling and moved to Toronto that I was able to even get support. And that was baffling to me, that there are people struggling and people who have realized they need help and who really are dying and going through this, and there's nobody there to listen. And so when I moved to Toronto and was surrounded by different places I could go and different supports I could utilize, it was astounding to me, and I was so thankful to be there. But then as a non-binary person, trying to find somewhere that clicked with me and understood the gender side of what I was going through, because at the time I was also going through my gender journey, it was not there. And so when I finished my undergrad, I was never wanted to go to graduate school. I thought that was the last thing I would ever want to engage with. I have a learning disability, and for me, writing just seemed like the last thing on my mind. But after that, I did my placement with NEDIC, which was full circle for me, getting to go to the place that really gave me my first start on my recovery. And listening to folks on the helpline and being on that helpline and getting to hear people's stories and hearing the difficulty that they had just trying to get someone to hear them and hear their story and not hear what the media has said their story should look like or what their body should look like if they have an eating disorder, or telling them they're not thin enough to have an eating disorder or to be struggling, I decided that that was something that needed to change. And so I tried looking, because I was in academia, for research, and it didn't exist. And so that's kind of the way that advocacy started working for me. And that's kind of the first time I started engaging in advocacy, was to go that research route, which is why I became a researcher and started researching my own community and researching folks' experiences. And the way that I do research is very narratively, and keeping people with lived experience at the center, because everything I saw was a doctor's perspective of what I should be going through, or the media's perspective of what I should be going through, and it was never my perspective. And so starting to bring that to light really got me realizing the power of lived experience and the power of listening to folks' voices and trying to put those voices back at the center of our government, of the policies being created, of the medical and healthcare that's happening, and putting those voices back in a place of power kind of became my core and what drives me now as a social worker and as an advocate and as a researcher. And so it really stems from all sorts of different places and seeing the difference it's made in folks' lives, both on the helpline in my own life and then in my practice now. It's just been, it's all because of advocacy that we got to this point.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, I love kind of speaking to just the layered barriers that exist. Even if, yeah, you do recognize that you have an eating disorder and you're willing to seek help, then actually having access to that help and having like that help in your area and being able to have rides or transportation or any of that. Like, there's just so many barriers that line up that keep people from getting support, even if they recognize that they need it and know that they need it. There's just so many barriers. And so that's, yeah, a huge part of what we're doing, is trying to understand what those barriers are, so that community-based supports and different supports can reach those communities that don't have that access, like people in rural communities, or people who are people of color and don't see themselves represented, or people of different genders who don't see themselves represented. Really kind of trying to break down those barriers. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Just before we dive into kind of going through the letter and understanding kind of the nuances of it, I'd love to just hear a little bit about how you guys engage in advocacy other than letter writing. So how else can you be an advocate for eating disorders, or an advocate for social justice issues that you care about, and what does that look like in your life? Wendy, if you want to start us off with just how else you advocate in all of the incredible work that you do. You're just a little muted. I do it all the time.
Sorry.
No worries.
As I mentioned earlier on, action is part of our tagline as well. And we are very much into the action stage of where need is actually right now, and where we are going, and where we want to be, and what do we want to do when we grow up. But besides writing a letter, which I think is an absolute incredible idea, one of the other things that we have really used as one of our strengths, and I am going to say that, is following up. I think it's a critical part of this whole letter writing campaign. It will be amazing. For what will probably end up happening is that the legislative assistants are going to end up getting the letters that are going to hopefully arrive by the hundreds of thousands in their inboxes, really. But following up with a letter is really critical for the legislative assistant and the MPP for you to remain sort of fresh in their mind, or somewhere in their minds anyway. Just sending a letter and leaving it is honestly not going to get you in. I don't think it will get you anywhere. And another thing that we've also found critical is not only writing to the MPP, but also to the health critics of the opposition, and address it to them as well. One of the other, and I've just kind of learned all these things as we've gone along on our sort of advocacy journey, is also not to CC anybody else on the letter. Make it personal to that person without copying anybody else on it. The other thing that we have done in the past is, if you know you're going to be having any eating disorder relevant event, whether it's a fundraising event or a particular meeting because you're so proud of something that is going to be happening in your community, is to invite these people to come. Because that way you're sort of staying in their minds, you're sort of going over the letter part again. And even if they are not able to come, their legislative assistants are often the ones that have got way more influence over their sort of boss or their MPP than you would imagine. So it's really, we've done that many times. And then also always leave some space for them to say a few words or open the event. Don't just let them have them come and, get lost in the shuffle. Let them come and do something, and so that it can also be acknowledged. And I also just wanted to share that I know it can be very intimidating when you hear of the word meeting, to go and meet with these people one-on-one. But there's a couple of things that, again, we have learned over the years. And I can really and honestly say that these MPPs, no matter what gender they are associated with or who they are across the desk, they are fathers or brothers or uncles or husbands or partners or cousins. And they are amazing, amazing people. So don't feel intimidated. It's just the most intimidating thing is just picking up that phone. You're not going to speak to the MPP. You're going to end up talking probably to their legislative assistant who's going to make the meeting date. And be pretty insistent on why you want to meet face-to-face as a follow-up to your letter. Don't let them wash you away. So that's another thing that we have done, and it's been successful. I know that over the years, we raised the bar of awareness, and I think that is also ultimately what has got us around mental health tables and brought eating disorders to these tables. One other thing I can also recommend and suggest is for you, I'm not sure if it's in every province, and I meant to check this up before I came on. If there is a health ombudsman in the provinces where you can write a letter as well, the same one, complaining, like, Tierra, you did a brilliant job. Both you and Alicia, of your lived experience and all the issues that you are speaking about, each and every one of them are so, so valid and so important. And once the Health Ombudsman's office has these letters on file, and I would probably recommend mailing them as well as emailing them so that they have a hard copy ready, they all get filed. They're not just discarded. So hopefully when all these thousands arrive at the office for them as well, something else will happen. Want me to carry on? Give something else?
No, that's great. I think those are so many good points of, the importance of, if you want to do advocacy and make really plausible changes, to build a relationship with the elected officials in your area and try to get to know them and invite them to different events and follow up and those kinds of things. I think those relationships are really, really important, and it's a really important piece. So thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Wendy. Tierra, do you want to say a little bit about how else you advocate and can be an advocate for eating disorders kind of in the world we're in?
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to say anything that Wendy has, because she's a great job. If you want to create change, you need to advocate. Simple as that. So if you're comfortable with it, if you have lived experience, advocate. If you know someone, if you know of someone, you have to advocate for them. If you work in the field of eating disorders or somewhat related, you have to advocate. And of course, there's so many ways to do that. As Wendy sort of mentioned, in addition to sending the letter, which I think is very important, just follow up, like phone call, make an appointment, go in person, meet with your MP, like have a discussion. Other ways that you can advocate is just supporting other organizations who are doing the work, like Body Brave, like NEDICS, like NEED. Another thing is sign the petition for Bill 61 and act to proclaim Eating Disorder Awareness Week in Ontario. I know Jill's not here, but I imagine she'd be talking about this right now. It takes 2 minutes to do that. And the other things that I want to touch on is just how to be an advocate in your everyday life, right? So it doesn't always have to be like these overly grand gestures. You can be an advocate around like against eating disorders by with the people you engage with every day. So focusing on doing less harm to others. So that means not focusing on their physical body, their physical appearance, their change, not talking about diets, like, and that's a way to advocate. Just I'm just throwing it out there. Another thing that I want to mention is if you work in a field that overlaps with this, so if you work in education, health, nutrition, the fitness industry, use these spaces to educate others and to make a difference. And I can give you an example. So as a yoga teacher, I can't tell you how many times I've had like a student come up to me or send me a message and is like, you know, I love yoga. I want to get involved with this. Will it help me lose weight? And I use that as an opportunity to steer away from the weight loss diet culture conversation and to educate them on, you know, what yoga is. For example, it helps you to feel connected with your body, grounded in yourself. It fuses together your breath and your body. It makes you feel strong. So just, you know, in whatever you do, focus on doing less harm. So yeah, advocacy can take many shapes and forms. It means speaking up or doing the work in your everyday life. And again, I just want to say, when we're not vocal about the things that we want to change, then there's not going to be change. So you got to advocate in every way possible.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tierra. I love that point of advocacy is political, and it's also personal. It's also the personal relationships that we have, and how we treat others, how we treat ourselves, and all of those pieces are part of advocacy and what that means and what that looks like. And I love that point. I think that's so important for people to, if you're sending this letter, but you're also kind of perpetuating harm in other ways, that's also something to take a look at and just make sure that you're understanding. Thanks so much. Alicia, do you want to just finish us off with how else you can be an advocate for these issues?
Sure. So for me, it's funny because I already sent my letter. I got very excited when I saw the link, so I did it right away. And for me, when I was reading the letter and reading the things we were asking someone to acknowledge the reality of eating disorders and the reality of people's experiences. For myself, it also needs to start in my own life, doing that and acknowledging folks and acknowledging my own story. So for me, writing a letter seemed like, even 5 years ago, I would have been terrified to do that and send it to my MP, because they seem like this figure in my mind, like this all-powerful figure that we elected, and why would they want to listen to just me? But the power of my story and the power of everyone's stories and everyone's connections, we are the people they want to hear from. We are their constituents. They want to hear from us, and our stories are just as powerful as every vote that they got in that box or computer now, because we do it through digital. And so for me, sharing my story and inviting others and giving them space to hear their stories is such an important part of advocacy, because we can write letters and ask other folks to do things, but we also need to do it in our own lives ourselves. And so for me, it always starts with myself and acknowledging that my story is not the only story. And just because my story looks one way doesn't mean someone else's will either, which is why for me, another part of my advocacy is doing research, specifically in my own community. Because a lot of the research that exists is perpetuated by folks who maybe didn't even have an eating disorder or haven't engaged with it and thought that it would be an area that was easy to get published or something that they were asked to do by their place of employment or their school or their college. And so by putting those voices back into research, the things that actually create the evidence for these programs, the evidence for treatment, it's so important. And that's one of the reasons why I got involved with Body Brave on the board, is that Body Brave itself has their own research committee on the board, and they do so much work in trying to look at all those different angles. And so that's another way for me for advocating, is getting involved. If folks are comfortable getting involved and volunteering with the organizations that mean so much to so many people, the organizations that support folks that are in your community, and having that voice. And if you don't have an organization in your community, speak up and tell your community, your MPs, the people around you, that that's something you need, is that support. And so for me, like I still volunteer with NEDIC on some of their committees. I'm volunteering at Body Brave because they're the closest to Niagara for me. And just having a space there and supporting these organizations can go so far. And because if we're not supporting them, how can we expect our government to? And so again, for me, it just always starts with the self and seeing how much we can do in our own lives, just in the little things we do, like standing up and speaking out. Like, for example, I'm wearing a shirt that says eating disorders are social justice issues. So constantly perpetuating that no matter where I go. If I hear someone saying something that is against or harmful to someone, trying to speak up if I feel the space and if I feel comfortable in that space, and letting others know that if they would like to speak up, I back them 100%, and allowing other folks to take that spotlight sometimes as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alicia. Those are, yeah, such good points. I love kind of the idea of using your strengths in what you do in terms of advocacy. So yeah, research is something that, I mean, you didn't plan to go to grad school, but something that you ended up being really passionate about and doing. And so using that as a way to advocate, and different people just using their skills and what they love and what they're passionate about, those are different ways that you can advocate. And maybe you have to be creative in some way of how those two things of advocacy and what you love tie together, but they always do. And so just finding ways that work for you. And so maybe letter writing is not your forte, that's okay. That's why we made a template. But if something else is, like it's art or research or having conversations with people, all of those things can be so powerful. And so just finding out what works for you is such an important way to advocate. I love that. Awesome. I am going to share my screen now, and we're going to just go through a little bit of the letter, just making sure that everyone feels comfortable and kind of knows what we're looking at. Gonna make sure I actually share it this time. Okay, I think it's working. So this is just the kind of landing page for the letter campaign. We have our title here, a little bit about the letter campaign, and then this is the actual letter and where you're actually going to write in some of your information. So this platform finds your local representative for you. So if you type in your address, I'm going to type in Body Braves. No, not there. There we go. If you type that in, it will come up with your MP, with your MPP. And so if these people are people that you don't know yet, just keep track of their names. Maybe look up what their email is if you do want to follow up, or any of those pieces. And so those are there, and they will be different depending on whatever address you put in here. Then you can go on and adding your name, last name, and your email. So it just make sure that it has their details in case they are going to contact you if they want to reply, and just let you know what they're doing, and all of those pieces. Right here is a little thing that just says email tips, and that just is a little bit about the rest of this email. So we have kept the template nice and short and sweet, wanting it to be read as, oh gosh, I did that last time too, wanting it to be read, but also feel free to personalize it to you, share your own story, and feel free to add the name of a community-based organization in your area. And so this is the letter. It changes the name based on your MP and your MPP, and you can read the whole letter there. And there's just one part here that says, but organizations like Body Brave are in need of your support. Feel free to change that to any organization. Looking Glass in BC is doing incredible work. If that's where you are, add their name. If you do a lot of work with NEED, add their name. Eating Disorders Nova Scotia, all of these different places do incredible work. So please do not feel like you have to put Body Brave there. Put whatever organization you are passionate about. Or if there isn't a specific one in your community, you can write that in there too. Say there isn't one that we can really support at this time, but there should be. And so feel free to add that. If you want to add any details around your lived experience, whether that's as a caregiver, as a friend supporting someone with an eating disorder, or having an eating disorder yourself, feel free to add that in as well. Write in what your personal experience is, because that is what is going to make your email different from other ones that are sent in from this template. And that's so important. And it's that storytelling that really gets the heart of what we do. So the whole letter is there. You can choose yes, send me updates, and that will just send you updates in terms of the campaign and how it goes when it ends and all those things. Do not feel like you have to do that. You can just say no, don't send me updates, and Body Brave will be keeping people updated on our social media and website about how the campaign goes and all of those different pieces. So you will hopefully be updated either way. And then you will just click send my email. The email will be sent, and you will receive just an email from Body Brave just saying thank you for participating and those kinds of things. And then your email is sent. And so that is the Brave Letters campaign. After you have sent it, there's also an option to share on Facebook or Twitter or any of those platforms. And please, we encourage you to do that, even if it's just with a select few people in your family or friend group. The more people and from different places that we can get is so valuable. So we would highly appreciate it if you were able to do that. And again, of course, please write in whatever community treatment support that you want. This isn't necessarily about Body Brave at all. Community-based treatments across the country need support, and that's what we want to do with this letter. So please feel free to add any of those things to the letter as you are writing it. Awesome. I'm going to just check the Q&A. We have some questions. Oh, someone said, yeah, suggestion to use your social media channels. Absolutely. So share this as far and wide as you feel comfortable, and share it with people who you think would be likely to share it as well, but also maybe those who don't. This can be kind of part of your advocacy, is just starting those conversations in those kinds of pieces. Yeah, there's a question of why are we making it COVID related? Yeah, that's a really good question. Part of it is just because a lot of the funding that has kind of been allocated to provinces and to healthcare actually included a lot of different health and mental health things, but did not mention eating disorders at all. And so eating disorders kind of received no support. And so that is why this specifically is COVID related. This is not the end of these kinds of campaigns that we are going to be running and going to be sharing. And so this is work we want to continue to do outside of things related to COVID-19, but that's just this letter specifically is kind of in relation to that. And then I believe this is more of a question maybe for panelists if you have a response to this, but someone is just asking, how can we make eating disorders stand out when there are so many other issues in the landscape? Yeah, Wendy.
Well, I think we just have to keep on persevering and keep on pushing. And what's that saying? The squeaky wheel gets heard. You know, the more we keep quiet and the more we stay locked up and stigmatized and a big secret, the less things are going to happen. So I think we just have to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and don't give up. NEED will certainly never give up, as I'm sure Body Brave and all the other community programs around the country will never give up. I just wanted to add two quick things about the letter as well. I really think it's important to print it out and to mail it, because I think at a time like now, these MPPs are going to get hundreds of emails in their inboxes, and it's going to take a while for them to get to your letter. So I really would encourage all of you to send an email, fantastic, but print it out and send it by snail mail. And the other one that I'm going to also recommend you send the email to is to the Minister of Health in your province. Send the same letter or a different one, whatever you want, but let them all know what this, you know, that the letter is going to be, that the letter is coming to different people, and hopefully this one will speak to that one, and eventually, you know, maybe with the assistance, they'll get to know that the letter has gone to more than just one person. And the other last thing I'll quickly say also is that this is really a non-partisan issue. This is a human rights issue. So it doesn't matter what party you're writing to, and you can even mention in your letter that this is not a political issue. This is a human issue. And it doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative or NDP, it goes to all parties. So I think that's also an important thing to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Sorry, Tierra or Alicia? Don't know who raised their hand first. So.
Yeah. It's like, who's gonna go? I want to say, you know, That's a good point. You know, there's a lot of things happening right now. And I think it's a good time to bring up that eating disorders overlap with many things, right? For example, what's happening now with regards to anti-Black racism, eating disorders like overlap with race, with class, with gender identity, with ableism, you know, the list goes on. Eating disorders also are associated with many comorbidities. So if we want to go in a discussion about depression, anxiety, eating disorders also are associated with these things as well. So what I would say is just like bring it up in any way possible. So if a conversation comes up, I'm sure there's a way you can loop in eating disorders, right? Diet culture, eating disorders are right there. So find a way to just loop it in.
Yeah, I kind of echoing that. I was thinking the same thing, Tierra. And for myself, so I work as a social worker, as I mentioned, but even thinking about my education. So we hear a lot, especially in eating disorders, about the education that doctors get and medical practitioners. Social workers aren't always considered medical practitioners. And before that, I was a social service worker, and I have friends who are ECEs, and all of those folks who also work in social services and have that tie to healthcare. We didn't get the training on eating disorders in school either. The training when you take mental health classes, a lot of times is about anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and there's a very kind of like standard maybe 6 that you hear about. And the reality is that in those classes, I was the one always bringing it up because I was the person with lived experience. And then I've always wondered how we can get it to a place where there doesn't have to be one person in the room to bring it up, where it's just a part of the curriculum. And so advocating to anyone that you know, if they don't know about eating disorders, and if, say, you mention, I was at a panel for a letter writing campaign and we were talking about eating disorders, and if somebody says, oh, well, I don't really know much about it, urging them to go get educated on it. Educating yourself if you're a student, if you're a practitioner, if you're a parent, whether or not you already know someone in your life or you are aware that you know someone in your life who is struggling, educating yourself on it is so imperative, because I think the more that we normalize talking about it, the more that we bring it up in conversation, the more it will make people less uncomfortable when we do. Because I know for myself, when I bring up my eating disorder, sometimes I see people just shut down and they get very meekish, and it's like they don't want to talk to me about it, or they don't want to say the wrong thing. And the reality is, as long as you're saying something, it's the right thing, because at least then you're acknowledging what I've gone through, you're acknowledging that there are other people going through it, and acknowledging that it's an important topic that needs to be discussed. Mental health in general, speaking on that front, a lot of the big mental health organizations, mental health was stigmatized for a very long time, and it's taken a lot of work to get it to the point where it's at now, and we still have a lot of work to go, but there are some diagnoses and some things that are still stigmatized more than others, and unfortunately eating disorders are one of them. And the only way we can break this stigma and break this kind of meekish response we get is by continuing the conversation and being open and talking and sharing and doing exactly what we're doing right now, and by joining these conversations just like everyone who's here has. And so by being here, I think we're already starting to combat that, how to get eating disorders a place and a voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are both really good points, Tierra and Alicia. And I think, yeah, just, of course, there are always lots of other issues that are going on in the landscape, and it's not about making eating disorders more important than them, but just figuring out what is the intersection between those things, and why does one relate to another, and how can we actually kind of use these other issues that are coming up to talk about eating disorders, because they are important. And so thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, right? The lack of accessibility and access for people of color and for Black people to actually have support in terms of eating disorders is a huge, huge problem. And so they're not two separate issues. And so just also trying to change the way that we think about social issues in general, I think is also important. There are just a couple questions about different people to CC and who we're CCing and those kinds of things. With this platform, we are a little bit limited in some ways in terms of there's only so many people we can, there's a bunch of stuff. But so if there are certain people you want to CC, like the PMO, or someone mentioned in BC, they have MLAs, which I assume is not a type of referencing thing as my university brain thinks it is, but other people, feel free to just copy and paste this email and send it CCing the people that you think are important. There are just some limitations with the platform, but that's not to say that the people you normally CC or want to CC aren't people that should be part of this letter. So yeah, really appreciate people bringing that up because that is super important. Someone mentioned always good to piggyback on special days. So Mental Illness Awareness Week, different things like that, Eating Disorder Awareness Week, all of those times are really good. Speaking about advocacy in general to bring up these conversations. Awesome. It is 7:55, so 5 minutes to 8. And so I want to thank everyone for coming today, for taking part, for listening to our incredible panelists about their experiences and their work in advocacy. It's so different from one to the next. And so Wendy and Alicia and Tierra, we so appreciate you being here and sharing so much of yourselves to talk about this and to really just talk about why this is so important. We really appreciate it. So thank you for taking the time out of your evening. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for spending this time, depending where you are, evening, midday, I don't know, spending this time with us and learning a little bit more about this campaign, why this campaign matters to us, and different ways we want to be moving forward. So please feel free to send a letter. If you can use the platform to do it, that's great. That just helps us keep track. If not, and there's other people you want to send it to, that is also excellent. That is no problem at all. So thank you so much. We are so excited. Our goal is to have 500 emails sent in the next week to people across Canada. And so with this platform, we are able to keep track of those numbers and who they're sent to and where they're sent from and those kinds of things. And we're so excited to be sharing that information with you as it unfolds and as we get it. So just leaving everyone with whatever advocacy looks like in your life, that is great. However advocacy feels, whatever feels good to you in terms of what advocacy is, then that's the advocacy you should be doing. Advocacy is different for everyone. And maybe reading this letter and understanding a little bit more about this type of advocacy is something that helps you and dip your toes into different kinds of ways of interacting with advocacy in your life. And that's a super powerful way of kind of engaging with it. But again, Wendy, Alicia, Tierra, thank you so much for taking your time to talk with us all. Jill, Andrew, thank you for doing great work. And we will hopefully be hearing from her shortly on different channels and different platforms. But again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to sign the letter, share the letter, and we are excited to be sharing all of the results and things with you guys soon.
Which, by the way, I did put the link to the letter in the chat for everyone. So if you did not know how to access the letter quite yet, I know an email will probably be going out tomorrow sometime with a reminder link. But the link, I will do it again. I'm going to do it right this second. The link is also in the chat right now. So if you'd like to click it, that'll bring you to the live campaign and share it anywhere.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.